She started having seizures when she was about 5 weeks old. And although I had never seen a seizure before, and what she did was not something completely unusual, I just knew right away that that seemed like a seizure. So I was very concerned right away. But it was quite some time before anybody else really seen her doing what I was seeing. So it was a couple of weeks before she was diagnosed. She started off on phenobarbital. She was 6 weeks old at that point, and she was on that for about 6 months. And during that 6 months, she continued to scream and not sleep, and except for about an hour a day, where she would finally settle down and sleep. And then at that point, the phenobarbital, like they had to increase the doses, and it just wasn't doing a good job of controlling the seizures. So at that point, we switched to Keppra. And the very first day that she took the Keppra, she slept through the night. And she woke up the next day and smiled her very first smile. And that whole night I laid awake wondering why she wasn't up, what was wrong with her, but I didn't dare want to go in her room and disturb her. So I let her go, but I worried about her all night long because this was something that had never happened in her life. So she still takes that, but she's taken lots of different medicines, triliptal, Banzel. We've went through many. Each time the pattern seems to be the seizures get longer, they start getting more frequent, we up the dose, it drops it back down, and eventually we're maxed out on the dose and the seizures are ramping up again. So they've always kept her on the Keppra, but changed the other medications. So a couple of years ago, as the seizures started ramping up as a teenager, they decided to try to add a third medication. And at that point, we started seeing some side effects of that medication. And she was already maxed at the other two medicines that she was on. She wasn't sleeping well. She would be constantly awake, and she would start to fall down. We noticed a lot of falls. The school, she was having trouble falling down at school. She was falling down a lot at home. And it happened pretty quickly after we had upped the starter dose. They had the starter dose she went okay with. As soon as we upped the dose, we started noticing these different side effects. And you could just tell it wasn't her, and she was falling a lot on the new medication. When the third medication didn't work, or didn't really help to decrease the seizures, we were referred to an epileptologist, and he explained to us that for about 30% of people, medications or any combination of medications it just isn't going to control their seizures. While it's helped considerably, because I know she has that tendency to have multiple seizures, the medications helped. It hasn't stopped them at any point in her life. Any combination of medication has not. So at that point, they began to discuss possible options such as surgery, and initially told us that the diet for her would not be an option because she doesn't understand. And being as she goes to school with other kids, even if she got a hold of a potato chip or something at school, it would, ruin the diet for her. So they were not at that time suggesting that the diet was an option, and wanted to see about evaluating her for surgery. We went through the evaluation process, all the testing, and they got a hold of us and told us that, yes, they felt the surgery was recommended for her, but they did at that point say that as a group, they decided if we wanted to try the diet, that it wouldn't hurt for us to try it. She also has cerebral palsy and microcephaly. So I'm not sure, how much damage the seizures have done, or if it is the other issues that is causing her disabilities. She is able to walk. She learned to walk when she was about 4.5, unassisted. She had used a walker for about 6 months prior to that, and then one day just left the walker behind and kept going, which was beautiful to see. She does not speak. though, she does understand very well and attempts to communicate. She has great nonverbal communication skills, and she can usually find a way to get her point across. The hardest thing is if I can tell like she's not feeling well, she isn't always able to give me a good idea of what is wrong. That's a very hard thing for her. And I usually try to tell her, find a way to show me, find a way to show me. And sometimes she's able to, point at her foot or something like that to let me know this is where my problem is. But that isn't always real consistent. My husband and I really felt that we needed to exhaust every option before we did something so drastic as a surgery that couldn't be undone. If we tried the diet and we needed to stop it, not a big deal, but a surgery was permanent. And the number of seizures that she was having, because we've seen them so long, although they had increased, I hear stories of people having 50 or 100 seizures a day. And I thought I could see perhaps them doing a surgery. That made sense to me. But for somebody that's having the seizure once a week or maybe 2 or 3 times a day and once a week, it seemed extreme for the situation we were in. And I don't know if that is just like a numbness from, dealing with it for so many years, that it's just kind of become an everyday thing. Maybe I would feel differently about it if it was me personally having them. I'm not sure, but our thoughts were that it just seemed very drastic to jump right to the surgery. And we both felt that we needed to know in our hearts we had done everything. Even if the diet would be difficult, we needed to know we had done everything before we made the decision to have a surgery. So after speaking with the doctor, we said that yes, we wanted to try it. And we met with a dietitian who explained the things that we would need to do. But even prior to meeting with the dietitian, some of Sierra's favorite foods were carbs, macaroni and cheese, cheese crackers, things like that. And we knew those things needed to go. So within a few weeks of starting the diet, we noticed that there were changes in her seizure pattern. Not that we really had a reduction, and we may have even had a bit of an increase in her seizures, but I'd noticed that the typical pattern that we had always seen completely changed. Instead of her having seizures predominantly in the morning, it could happen at any time of day. So they may have gotten a little more frequent, but at the same time, they may have been a little, they may not have lasted as long, I think was the first sign that we noticed. So we definitely knew the diet was affecting her seizures, even though initially it wasn't affecting them necessarily in an overly positive manner. But we, at that point, were just not prepared to give up very easily. We wanted to stick it out and really see, because we knew that there was an effect. They had told us, it was a 50-50 shot that it would work for her in reducing her seizures. And when we seen that it was changing the seizures, we're holding out hope that we would be in that 50%. I think month 7, we started seeing a reduction in seizures and definitely a change in the length of seizures. She would typically have seizures lasting a little over 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes in that time frame. And we would have seizures that lasted seconds. So maybe 15 seconds, 10 to 15 seconds. She didn't even fall down into a full tonic-clonic seizure. It would just be a pause, a grimace of her face, and then she'd walk away like nothing had happened. So we were definitely seeing an improvement there. And we began seeing a reduction in the amount of seizures. So at that point, we knew we wanted to continue on with the diet. At that point, she was doing 15 net carbs a day. And when the seizure control wasn't quite where we wanted it to be, I think around maybe the 9-month mark or so, they said, well, they didn't want to drop her all the way down to 10 carbs. They said, well, try 12 for a couple weeks and see if you can make it work on 12 net carbs a day, see what happens. They didn't want to leave her overly hungry, but try to drop it down a little bit, which we did. And there was a little bit of an improvement. And then this past May, so about 7-8 months ago, we had a really bad May for seizures. And so they said, well, let's go 10. So we went to 10 carbs a day, and they said more fat. I said, okay, I don't know how, but I'll get it in there. And so we added more fat, and we've seen very good seizure control since May. On the Facebook group that I'm in for the modified Atkins diet, some of them say, well, my kid's been on this for 2 weeks, for 3 weeks, and I'm not seeing any progress, or maybe I'm seeing an increase of seizures. What do I do? Do I quit? And I just want to tell these people, stick with it. I mean, it took 7 months for us to see any real positive progress. We see a change, but it took us months to see a positive change. And it did work. So, to stick with it, to give it a good solid try, because it's not going to hurt. I mean, it's not really hurting them to try the diet. So, give it a shot and stick with it when it gets hard, because, it was hard. And now it's easy. I mean, at first I thought, how are we going to do this on 15 carbs a day? And now she's on 10 carbs a day. And it's like, oh, we can splurge on some meal that's like 4 carbs because I know I've got dinner covered, things like that. And I just, want to tell people, you just give it a really good try and stick, even when it's difficult, because, it may still work. It just may take a while to see real progress. I'm very glad that we went this route instead of jumping right to a surgery. She still has seizures, but is this controlling them enough and reducing them enough that we may not need to go through that surgery? And I think that we are seeing that it is helping enough that we can avoid a surgery and any possible complications that can come from that. So it's certainly worth giving the diet a try. It is hard, especially at first, but eventually you learn to live with it and adapt to it. And today, we could go anywhere. I wouldn't hesitate to, take her on vacation or whatever, knowing that we had the diet to contend with. It's just certain things that we would have to plan ahead of time. And I think that after 2 years on the diet, we've adapted well to those kind of challenges. And I'm glad of the place that we're at right now. And I really would encourage anybody to not hesitate. If you're considering it, find out more and give it a shot.